She parked her tattered sedan next to the police cars, whose flashers painted the front of the seaside condominium complex with flashes of blue and red wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked at the building, a typical South Florida three-story complex with white walls and a terracotta roof. Iris adjusted the holster under her light jacket and, showing her badge to the officer on duty, stepped inside. "Third floor, apartment 312, the young patrolman said, averting his gaze. Iris noticed his pallor. It looked like the guy rarely had to deal with drudgery. As she climbed the stairs, she mentally prepared herself. In 15 years in homicide, Iris had seen all sorts of things, but each new crime scene required an internal mindset. She was met on the third-floor landing by Chief of Forensics Rogers. "Banneker," he nodded. "It's hell out there." "Who found the body?" "A neighbor. Heard screams last night around 10 p.m., but didn't call the cops. Figured it was a domestic dispute." This morning, she saw the door ajar and came in. Iris crossed the threshold and immediately realized what Rogers meant. The living room was covered with blood. The woman's body lay on the coffee table, mutilated by multiple stab wounds. Her face was almost unrecognizable. Shards of shattered framed photographs lay around. Overturned furniture testified to the fierce struggle. "Zari Price, 31 years old," the medical examiner said, rising from his knees. The preliminary estimate of death was between 9 and 11 p.m. At least 20 stab wounds, mostly to the chest, abdomen, and face. Murder weapon? Most likely a kitchen knife. Found in the sink, killer didn't even try to hide it. Preliminary prints on it. Iris looked around the apartment. It was trendy, tastefully furnished, with expensive paintings on the walls and designer furniture. A piano with sheet music stood in the corner. The woman was clearly not poor. "Robbery?" she asked, noting the expensive things left untouched. "Not likely," Rogers replied. "Jewelry in the bedroom, cash in the desk drawer, electronics all in place." Iris walked over to the wall of photographs. Among the shards of glass were pictures of a smiling, dark-skinned woman. Some of them showed her with a tall, muscular man. "Is that the husband?" Iris pointed to the man. "Layman Price, 34 years old," replied a young detective who appeared in the doorway. "Currently serving time in the Palm Beach County Correctional Facility for armed robbery, or rather he was." Iris turned to the man who had spoken. Slender, with a neat beard and attentive eyes, he held a clipboard. "Detective Nero Katumba," he introduced himself. "I was transferred to your department last week. The captain assigned me to be your partner on this case." "What do you mean, served?" Iris asked, ignoring the formalities. Nero swiped his finger across the tablet screen. "Layman Price escaped yesterday afternoon during landscaping work, already on the wanted list." Iris felt a picture forming in her head. "So a husband escapes from prison and on the same day his wife is found brutally murdered?" She shook her head. "Too obvious." "My first day in homicide, but even I can see the connection," Nero said. Iris threw him an assessing glance. He's new, but he's got confidence. "Rogers, check every security camera in a 5-block radius. I need to know if Price was here, and canvass the neighborhood to see if anyone saw him." The detective spent the next 2 hours studying the crime scene. Iris scrutinized each room, noting details. In the bedroom, her attention was drawn to the neatly made bed with lots of pillows and a dressing table with premium cosmetics. On the bedside table was a photograph of a smiling couple, Zari in a white dress and Layman in an austere suit. Judging by the background, the picture had been taken on the beach. "When did they get married?" Iris asked. 3 years ago, according to the records," answered Nero, checking the information on the tablet. 6 months before he was locked up. In the bathroom, Iris noticed the carefully sorted skin and hair care products. Opening the medicine cabinet, she found several vials of prescription drugs. "Spironolactone, estradiol, finasteride," she read. "Do you know what these are, Katumba?" Nero frowned, examining the medication. "If I'm not mistaken, they're hormone therapy drugs. They're usually taken by transgendered people." Iris nodded. "See if our victim had any medical problems that required such treatment, or—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Nero nodded understandingly. Back in the bedroom, Iris began to examine the closets and dressers more thoroughly. In the depths of the closet, under a stack of sweaters, she found a small wooden box. Inside were several old photographs. One of them showed a young boy who looked remarkably like the murdered woman, but with short hair and wearing men's clothes. "Katumba, take a look." She handed the photo to her partner. Nero took a long look at the photo, then shifted his gaze to the other photos of the victim hanging around the apartment. "Is this the same person?" he finally said. "It looks like it." Iris continued rummaging through the box. "Look, a birth certificate in the name of Zahir Owens. Date of birth matches Zari Price. You think Zari was a transgender woman who didn't tell her husband?" Iris finished it for him. "And yesterday he somehow found out the truth, escaped from prison and came here." They looked at the photograph and the document in silence. An unspoken question hung in the air. Could this have been the motive for such a brutal murder? From the living room, Rogers called out to them, "Detectives, we have an image from a camera at a gas station 2 blocks from here. Layman Price was here around 8 hours last night." Iris and Nero went back to the rest of the officers. On the screen of the CSI's laptop was a grainy surveillance camera image. A tall man wearing a cap and dark clothing was walking along the road toward the condominium. "That's him," Iris confirmed, checking the image against the photo in the police database. "Make him the prime suspect. I need all patrol cars looking for him." Once downstairs, they began canvassing the neighborhood. Most of the tenants were at work, but they managed to talk to an elderly couple from the first floor and a housewife living across the street. "Oh, Zari was so nice," lamented the neighbor, a thin woman in her 50s. "Always saying hello, helping with the heavy bags, and she played the piano divinely." "Did you know her husband?" Nero asked. "Layman? Only in passing. They were such a beautiful couple, but after his arrest, Zari seemed withdrawn. She rarely went out, had few visitors." "Can you remember any of these guests?" The woman thought for a moment. "There was a young man who came often. Kemba, I think. He and Zari were close friends, and some other man, older, strong build, in uniform, a guard maybe." Iris and Nero looked at each other. A guard. Maybe from the same prison where Layman was incarcerated? "Did you see any strangers in the building yesterday? Maybe someone who looked like Layman Price?" Iris showed a picture of the suspect. "Oh my God." The neighbor turned pale. "Yeah, I saw him last night. He was coming up the stairs when I was taking out the trash. He looked very agitated. I thought maybe they let him out early." That information confirmed their suspicions. Layman had indeed been here the night before. Back at the headquarters, Iris and Nero began to organize the information they had gathered. On the board in the conference room, they placed crime scene photos, pictures of Zari and Layman, and a timeline of events. "So, what we have here," Iris began. "Layman Price, serving a 5-year sentence for armed robbery, escapes from prison yesterday. That same night, his wife Zari is found murdered in their apartment. Multiple stab wounds suggest a crime of passion. We find evidence that Zari was a transgender woman, and suggest that Layman may have recently found out. What would make him find out the truth now after 3 years of marriage?" Nero said thoughtfully, looking at the photos on the board. "And who was the guard who, according to the neighbor, visited Zari?" "We need to talk to the prison administration," Iris said, writing down the task on the tablet. "Find out which guard might have had contact with the prisoner's wife, and find this Kemba." At that moment, the duty officer knocked on the door of the conference room. "Detective Banneker, you have a visitor. He says he has information on the Price case." Iris and Nero stepped into the reception area, where a tall, slender man with a neat haircut and wearing an expensive suit was waiting for them. When he saw the detectives, he stood up and extended his hand. "Kemba Shaw," he introduced himself. "I'm a friend of Zari Price's, and I think I know why she was killed." Kemba Shaw sat across from the detectives with his hands around a cup of cold coffee. There was an oppressive silence in the interrogation room. Iris scrutinized the man, manicured hands, expensive suit, confident but sad gaze. "Zari and I have known each other since college," Kemba began, after a long pause. "That's when I met Zahir Owens. We studied together in Miami, in the art department. Zahir was an accomplished pianist." Nero took notes while Kemba talked. Iris kept an impenetrable expression on his face. "When exactly did Zahir become Zari?" she asked. The process was gradual. Back in college, Zahir confided in me that he felt like a woman. After graduation, he started hormone therapy. By the time he was 26, he'd completed the transition a legal name change, all official. That was 2 years before he met Layman. Did Layman know about his wife's past? Nero asked. Kemba shook his head. No. Zari was afraid to tell him. When they met, she was already fully alive as a woman. She looked gorgeous. His voice trembled. Decided to start fresh, unburdened by the past. You didn't approve of that decision, Iris said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I'd told her that the truth always comes out, especially in a marriage. Kemba rubbed his temples. The longer she put off the conversation, the scarier the potential consequences became, but Zari was sure that if Layman loved her as she was now, the past wouldn't matter. But Layman had a different point of view? Nero clarified. Layman was a complicated man, with a troubled past, a violent temper. Zari said he had an inner core, a sincerity, but I saw him different, possessive, jealous. Kemba took a sip of coffee. After his arrest, Zari came to me in tears more than once, regretted that she'd tied her life to a criminal, but she wouldn't consider divorce, said she'd taken a vow. Iris looked at the picture of the happy couple from the beach, which they took from the apartment. How do you think Layman could have known the truth? Kemba tensed. In recent months, Zari had mentioned a guard from the prison, Effion Tucker. At first, she said he was just passing on news from Layman, then she started mentioning him more often. I suspected they were in a relationship. Do you think this guard might have told Layman? Iris asked. I don't know for sure, but 2 weeks ago, Zari called me in a panic, said that Tucker had threatened to tell Layman everything if she stopped seeing him. She was going to leave, go into hiding for a while. He lowered his head. I should have insisted she leave immediately. After a long conversation with Kemba, the detectives obtained information about Zari's past, her relationship with Layman, and, most importantly, the contacts of people in her entourage. Kemba also gave them access to joint photos and correspondence. I'll check into what's known about Tucker, Nero said as they returned to their desks after the interrogation. If he works at the Palm Beach County Correctional Facility, we'll find him quickly. Iris nodded. And I'll handle Zari's finances. If she was planning to leave, there should be a trail of hotel reservations, tickets. Maybe she had time to withdraw money. For the next hour, they plunged into their work. Iris studied the bank statements they'd managed to get through the expedited procedure, and Nero called the prison authorities. Effion Tucker, he said finally, hanging up. 37 years old, in his 5th year at the correctional facility. Didn't show up for his shift today, didn't answer his cell phone. Suspicious, Iris said. Give me his address and we'll go see him. Tucker's house was in a working-class neighborhood about 15 minutes from the prison. It was a modest 1-story house with an unkept garden. The detectives rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered. No car, Nero noted, peering into the garage through a cloudy window. Do you think he's on the run too? Could be. Let's check the neighborhood. A neighbor, an elderly woman watering flowers on the porch across the street, said she saw Tucker leave early in the morning with a travel bag. He looked anxious, in a hurry. On the way to the prison, Nero got a call from forensics. The knife that killed Zari had Layman Price's prints on it. Now they had solid proof of his guilt. The Palm Beach County Correctional Facility was a complex of gray concrete buildings surrounded by a high barbed wire fence. The detectives were met by the deputy warden, a grim man with a military bearing. The warden will make official comments at a press conference tomorrow, he said as they introduced themselves. The escape of a prisoner is a serious matter. We're not interested in comments, but in facts. Iris cut him off. How did Layman Price manage to escape? The deputy warden reluctantly led them into his office. Price was in a group of inmates who were working on landscaping. The site is next to the outer fence. At some point, a guard got distracted and Price just climbed over the fence. That wasn't supposed to happen. That guard was Effion Tucker? Nero asked. The deputy frowned. Yes, how did you know? Just a coincidence, Iris said. What can you tell me about Tucker? He's a good employee. No complaints until yesterday. Today he didn't show up for work, didn't answer his cell phone. We've already started an internal investigation. "We need to talk to the inmates who had contact with Price," Iris said, "and with staff who knew Tucker." They spent the next 2 hours interviewing inmates and guards. Gradually, a picture began to emerge. Tucker was indeed in regular contact with Zari, sending her greetings from her husband. According to Lehman's cellmate, Tucker and Price had an argument about a month ago, after which Lehman became withdrawn and aggressive. Tucker said something to him about his wife, the cellmate shared. Lehman wasn't specific, but he wasn't himself. He kept saying, "She lied to me. Everything was a lie." "When exactly did this happen?" Nero asked. "About 3 weeks ago. After that, all Lehman did was work out at the gym and make escape plans. I thought it was just talk." As they left the prison, Iris's cell phone rang. It was Rogers calling with the new forensics. They found messages from Tucker on the victim's phone. Apparently, they were having an affair. There's correspondence where he threatens to tell her husband if she leaves him. "Classic love triangle," Nero noted when Iris gave him the contents of the conversation. Tucker falls in love with the prisoner's wife. She tries to end the relationship. He retaliates by revealing her secret to her husband. "And the husband is so shocked that he escapes from prison and kills his wife," Iris finished. "Now we need to find both Lehman and Tucker." By evening, they returned to the office, where new information was waiting for them. An analysis of Zari's bank transactions showed that she had withdrawn a large sum of cash 3 days before the murder. Detectives also discovered that Tucker had cashed out his credit card the morning of the murder. They both withdrew the money at almost the same time, Iris noted. Maybe they planned to run away together, but something went wrong. It was late afternoon when the desk clerk reported a call from the manager of a motel on the outskirts of Deerfield Beach. A man who looked like Lehman Price had checked out the night before and still hadn't checked in. Iris and Nero immediately headed there with the extraction team. The motel was a dreary 2-story building with peeling paint and a neon sign, some of the letters unlit. "Room 27 at the far end," the receptionist, an older woman with glasses, pointed out. "Paid cash for 2 nights. Police officers surrounded the room. Iris knocked on the door. "Deerfield Beach Police. Open the door." The answer was silence. After a third warning, the officers broke down the door. The cramped room was a mess. Crumpled bed, scattered belongings, empty whiskey bottles. On the table was a photograph of Zari, torn in half. But Lehman himself was gone. "Check the bed," Iris commanded. "Still warm. He'd been here recently." In the bathroom, they found bloody clothes, and in the trash can a bus ticket to Miami, leaving in an hour. "He's heading toward the bus station," Iris said, calling for backup on the radio. "All patrol cars, block off the roads to the Deerfield Beach bus station. Suspect is armed and dangerous." Patrol cars with sirens blaring scattered through the city. Detectives raced toward the bus station, hoping to intercept the fugitive before he escaped. A race against time awaited them. They met at a small jazz club in downtown Miami where Zari was a guest pianist. Lehman had gotten there by chance. Friends had dragged him out to celebrate a good deal. He noticed her as soon as she sat down at the piano, a graceful woman with a proud posture and long fingers that seemed to fly over the keys. Zari couldn't help but notice the tall man with an attentive gaze who kept his eyes on her all evening. After the performance, he came up, extended his hand, and introduced himself with the confidence that comes with the habit of getting what you want. "Lehman Price. Your music made me forget everything." She smiled, trying to hide her excitement. "Zari Owens. I'm glad you enjoyed it." They talked until dawn that night. He talked about his business importing exotic fruits, his plans to open a chain of organic cafes. He didn't mention anything about the underground gambling and money laundering on which his wealth was actually built. She shared dreams of a concert tour, her own music studio, and she kept silent about Zahir, about the long journey to her true self, about her fears that someone from her past life would recognize her and reveal the secret. Their romance had developed rapidly. Flowers, expensive restaurants, weekends on a private yacht. Lehman was generous, passionate, with that primal masculinity that made Zari feel desirable as a woman. He idolized her body, and every time she thanked fate that her surgeon was a true master. 6 months later, Lehman asked her to marry him. Kneeling on the beach, with a ring that cost a fortune, he said he had never met a woman like her. Then, Looking into his eyes full of adoration, Zari decided to keep silent about her past again. Later, she thought, when the right moment comes. They were married on the same beach, a small ceremony for close friends only. Kemba was the only one who knew her secret and cast concerned glances at her all evening. Then 6 months later, everything came crashing down. Federal agents broke into their home at dawn. Lehman was arrested for financial fraud and organizing illegal gambling. The trial was swift, 5 years in prison. Zari vowed to wait. Every week she came for dates, bringing books, talking about her concerts. Lehman, shattered and depressed at first, gradually came to his senses, talked about how they'd start fresh when he got out. "You're the only real thing in my life," he said, holding her hand in the visiting room. "Only with you can I be myself, without pretense." Zari smiled through her tears and remained silent, convincing herself that it wasn't a lie. She really did love him. "Effion Tucker, you're under arrest for accessory to the escape of a prisoner." Iris snapped the handcuffs on the former guard's wrists. They found him in a cheap motel 40 miles outside of town. Not a very smart escape plan, using his own credit card to pay for the room. Now he sat in the interrogation room, pale and sweaty, tapping his foot nervously on the floor. "I didn't do anything," he repeated for the third time. Lehman had escaped on his own. It was an accident. An accident? Nero spread the surveillance photos in front of him. "You're the only guard who was in the area he escaped from. You accidentally left your tools near the fence, and you accidentally turned your back at just the right moment." Tucker ran his hand over his face. "You have no proof." "We have messages on Zari's phone," Iris said, opening a folder of printouts. "If you leave me, your hubby will find out who you really are." "Those are your words, aren't they?" Tucker's face contorted as if in pain. "She had no right to do that to me. I loved her. I really did." "And that's why you told Lehman that his wife was a transgender woman?" Nero asked. "She used me!" Tucker slammed his fist on the table. "All these months she told me she loved me, that we'd move away as soon as we saved enough money. And then I saw her flirting with another guard, a fool like me." "So you decided to get revenge," Iris stated. Tucker lowered his head. "I didn't want her to die. I just told Lehman that his perfect wife wasn't quite who she said she was." "How did Lehman react?" "He didn't believe me at first. Then he started asking questions. I showed him a photo Zari had sent me of her and Kemba at some LGBT event. Lehman freaked out, started yelling that he was going to kill her. I didn't think he'd actually run off and do it." "You helped him escape," Nero said. "Now you're an accessory to murder." "He threatened me!" Tucker shrieked. "Said if I didn't help him, he'd tell all the prisoners that I'd been seeing a trance. Do you know what they do to me?" He wrapped his arms around his head. "I just left the tools and turned away for a minute. I didn't think it would turn out like that." "When was the last time you saw Lehman?" Iris asked. "Not since the escape. I got scared, called Zari, told him he'd escaped and knew everything. I told her to leave immediately. She said I had to get the money and documents from the apartment first. I begged her not to do that." Iris and Nero looked at each other. New details were forming into a clearer picture. Back at their desks, the detectives received the report from the forensics team. They found threatening messages on Zari's phone, not only from Tucker, but also from Lehman, sent from a smuggled cell phone the night before the escape. "I know all about you, scum. You'll pay for lying. Wait for me." The social media analysis revealed an interesting detail, Nero said, reviewing the tech department's report. On the day of the escape, Lehman accessed the internet through an illegal phone. He was looking for information about Zahir Owens, looking at old photos, postings on LGBT forums. He was gathering evidence, Iris nodded. He couldn't believe what Tucker said, wanted to see for himself. A patrol officer approached them. "Detectives, we have new witnesses. A couple living across the street from the condominium installed a home security system with a camera. The footage shows Lehman entering the building around 9 p.m. and leaving around 11. He looks agitated and dark stains are visible on his clothes." "Blood," Iris said. "Send a patrol to check the area around the motel again. Maybe he's hiding somewhere after we lost him at the bus station." They spent the next hours coordinating the search, reviewing surveillance footage, interviewing cab and bus drivers. The city seemed to swallow Lehman Price. Toward evening, Nero's cell phone rang. It was Kemba Shaw. "Detective Katumba, he called me." Kemba's voice was shaking. Lehman just called me. What did he say? Nero put him on speaker so Iris could hear. Asked if I knew the truth about Zari. When I confessed that I knew from the beginning, he burst into tears. Said his whole life was a lie, that everyone laughed at him. Kemba paused. And then he said he was going to the one place he was truly happy, the place where he proposed to her. Iris and Nero understood instantly. The beach, Iris said. The same place where they got married. Where in the picture? Palm Beach, the North End. There's a little cove there, Kemba answered. He often took her there at sunset. The detectives immediately organized an extraction team. 20 minutes later, police cars with their sirens off were pulling up to the picturesque cove. The sun was already setting, coloring the ocean orange. They saw a lone figure sitting on the sand at the water's edge. It's him, Iris whispered, looking at Lehman through her binoculars. It looked like he had something in his hand, probably a weapon. Surround on 3 sides, the team leader ordered. Detectives stay in the car until I give the signal. The officers spread out, stealthily approaching Lehman. Iris and Nero watched from the car, ready to join the operation at any moment. What is he holding in his hand? Nero asked tensely as the distance shortened. Iris adjusted the binoculars. It looks like a photograph and some kind of ring. At that moment, Lehman slowly turned his head. He noticed the officers approaching. Lehman slowly rose from the sand, keeping the photograph and the wedding ring in his hands. In the light of the setting sun, his massive figure cast a long shadow on the golden sand. The breeze from the ocean ruffled his clothes, the same clothes he had escaped from prison in, now wrinkled and dirty. Lehman Price, came the megaphone-enhanced voice of the assault team commander. You are surrounded. Raise your hands and kneel down slowly. Instead of answering, Lehman looked at the photograph in his hands, then glanced at the ocean, as if considering whether to throw himself into the waves. Iris, watching from the car, grabbed her walkie-talkie. Hold your fire, she commanded. Let me talk to him. Detective Banneker, it's too dangerous, the team leader objected. He's unarmed, she said as she got out of the car, and he has nowhere to run. Nero followed her, looking intensely at the figure of the fugitive. Be careful, he whispered. He has nothing to lose. Iris moved slowly toward Lehman, keeping her hands where he could see she wasn't going to draw her weapon. Snipers had taken up positions on the rocks surrounding the cove, the officers of the assault team clutching their weapons, ready to fire at the slightest suspicious movement. Mr. Price, Iris addressed him calmly, coming to a safe distance. I'm Detective Iris Banneker. You know why we're here. Lehman didn't answer. His gaze, blank and detached, was staring off into the distance. But he made no sudden movements, and Iris ventured closer. I know what you did. And why, she said quietly, so that only he could hear. But right now it's important that no one else gets hurt. Lehman's face contorted as if in pain. You don't know anything, he said in a hoarse voice. You can't imagine what it's like to find out that your life, your love, everything was a lie. Tell me, Iris offered, taking another step forward cautiously. I will listen to you. Lehman looked her straight in the eye, and Iris saw in his gaze a mixture of rage, pain, and deep despair. 3 years, he said. 3 years I've loved. He paused, searching for words. A man who lied to me from day one. Every kiss, every touch, every moment of intimacy. It was all built on deception. He held up a photograph, a wedding picture of him and Zari smiling, happy and in love. I really loved her, Detective. Can you believe that? There was bitterness in his voice. I loved her more than anything in the world. When I was arrested, the thought of her was the only thing that kept me alive in that cesspool. What happened when you found out the truth? Iris asked, slowly closing the distance. Lehman clenched his fists, his eyes darkening with anger. Tucker, that bastard. I didn't believe him at first. I thought he was just jealous, trying to break us up. But then he showed me pictures, links to Zahir's old social media profiles. He grinned bitterly. You know, I was ready to forgive even then. To say the past didn't matter, but not the lies. Not 3 years of pretending. And that's why you decided to run away and kill her? Iris was only a few feet away from him. "I wanted to hear the truth from her lips," Lehman whispered. "Give her a chance to explain. But when I came and saw her, so beautiful, so confident, she started to deny it. Said Tucker made it all up out of revenge." His voice shook. "And then I found those drugs in the bathroom, and the old photos she kept, and I just snapped." Iris noticed Nero slowly approaching from the other side, while Lehman was absorbed in his memories. "I don't remember grabbing the knife," Lehman continued, his gaze clouded. "I only remember her screams, my rage. I felt like I was killing not her, but the lie that had ruined our lives." Tears rolled down his cheeks, but he didn't even try to wipe them away. "The worst part, Detective," he looked at Iris with unbearable pain in his eyes. "I still love her. Even now, knowing the whole truth, I miss her every second." Iris remained silent, giving him a chance to speak. She knew that sometimes criminals just needed to be heard before they could accept their fate. "You know," Lehman continued, looking at the photograph, "when I first saw her in that jazz club, I felt something special. It was as if I'd been waiting all my life for something, not knowing what it was, and suddenly I found it." He ran his finger over the image of Zari. "She was playing the piano, some jazz piece, I don't even remember the name of it. But I remember the way her fingers moved, the way she closed her eyes in particularly emotional places. That night I asked her out for coffee. She accepted." His gaze softened at the memory. "We talked until the morning. She talked about her dreams, her music, the cities she wanted to visit. Not a word about who she used to be, not a hint." He squeezed the photograph so hard the edges bent. "We were married 6 months later. You know, Detective, I was proud of her. Such a beautiful, talented woman chose me. I wanted to give her everything." He shook his head. "And maybe that wasn't enough. Maybe she only saw me as a chance for a normal life, for security." "Lehman," Iris said softly, "what you did cannot be justified. But now you have a choice. Surrender voluntarily and tell your story, or..." She didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. They both knew there was no other way out. Suddenly, Lehman laughed, a bitter, jerky laugh. "A choice? What choice are you talking about, Detective? I haven't had a choice since I learned the truth. Maybe even from the moment I first saw her." He shifted his gaze to the ocean, where the last rays of the sun were coloring the water purple. "Do you know what I felt when Tucker told me? Disbelief at first, then anger, and then a strange relief." He looked at Iris, because it finally made sense. Why she never talked about her childhood, why she never introduced me to her relatives, why she always avoided certain topics. Nero was quite close, ready to intervene at any moment. He kept his hand on his holster, but he didn't draw his weapon yet, realizing that Iris was managing to keep the situation under control. "When I went to see her that night," Lehman continued, "I just wanted to talk. Honestly, I thought maybe we could start over with the truth." His voice trembled. "But she kept lying, even when I showed her the pictures Tucker gave me. Said they were photoshopped, that Tucker was obsessed with her and wanted to break us up." He lowered his head. "And that's when I started looking. I went through the whole apartment, found those meds, old IDs under Zahir Owen's name, her diary where she wrote about her transition." He looked up to Iris. "And you know what the worst part was? In that same diary, she wrote that she would never tell me the truth, that I was too traditional, wouldn't understand. She made up her mind for me, didn't even give me a chance." Iris listened intently without interrupting. She knew that Lehman's every word was being recorded on a hidden microphone and would later become part of the evidence in court. "At that moment, something in me broke," Lehman said. "Everything around me turned red. I remember yelling at her, how she cried, begging me to calm down, how she finally admitted that yes, she was born a man, that she was afraid she'd lose me if I found out." He shook his head. "And then all I remember is her blood on my hands, and the silence, the terrible silence after all that screaming." He looked up at Iris, and she saw in his eyes not only pain but realization. He realized what he had done, and he knew what would follow. "I loved her, Detective," he whispered, "but I didn't kill her. I killed our lies, our illusion of happiness. Nero was already only a few steps behind Lehman, ready to act. Lehman, Iris said, taking another step forward, I understand your pain, but what you've done, it's not a solution. It's a tragedy, for both of you. I know. He nodded. Believe me, I know it better than anyone. He lowered his gaze to the photograph and the ring in his hand, then slowly sank to his knees, laying them on the sand in front of him. I'm ready, he said quietly. Iris nodded to Nero, and he quickly walked over to Lehman, fastening the handcuffs on his wrists. The officers of the seizure team immediately surrounded them, ready to intervene at the slightest threat. Lehman Price, you are under arrest for the murder of Zari Price, Iris said formally. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. As she read out his rights, Lehman stared out at the ocean where the sun was slowly disappearing over the horizon. An expression of humility and deep sadness froze on his face. The judgment was swift, the evidence was irrefutable, the confession complete. Lehman made no attempt to deny his guilt or ask for a reduced sentence. His state-appointed lawyer tried to build a defense of temporary insanity, of affect caused by extreme emotional shock, but the jury was not convinced. The brutality of the murder, the multiple stab wounds, especially in the facial area, spoke of deliberate intent, not a momentary impulse. Iris and Nero had been present throughout. They saw Lehman grow quieter each day, as if he was withdrawing into himself. When the judge asked if he wanted to say anything before the verdict was read, he stood up and said only one sentence. I killed the man I loved most in the world, and for that there is no forgiveness. The sentence is life imprisonment with parole after 25 years. Felony murder, aggravated murder. On the last day, as Lehman was being led away in handcuffs, Iris approached him in the court corridor. Why did you turn yourself in on the beach? She asked. You could have tried to escape. Lehman looked at her with tired eyes. Because I was already dead inside, detective. From the moment I saw the fear in her eyes and realized what I was doing. My body just didn't have time to realize it. He paused, then added, You know what the ironic thing is? If she had told me the truth from the beginning, I might have been able to accept it. Not right away, but over time, because I really did love her. He shook his head. But she didn't give me that chance, decided for me. And did you give her a chance to explain? That night? Iris asked quietly. Lehman lowered his gaze. No, I thought I had, but in fact, I'd already passed judgment by the time I crossed the threshold. He raised his eyes to the detective. We both made irreparable mistakes, Detective Banneker. Only the cost of her mistake was incomparably higher. The escort tapped him on the shoulder, signaling it was time to go. Lehman cast one last glance at Iris and allowed himself to be led away. 6 months had passed. Iris was reviewing reports on recently closed cases when Nero placed an envelope on her desk. From Lehman Price, he said. The prison authorities checked, nothing dangerous. Iris opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter written in neat handwriting. Detective Banneker, I don't know why I'm writing to you. Maybe because you're the only person who listened to me without judgment that day on the beach. I've been thinking a lot these past few months. About love, about hate, about forgiveness, about whether truth or happiness is more important. I haven't found any answers. Every night I see Zari's face, not the moment I killed her, but the day we first met, when she played the piano and the whole world ceased to exist for me. I can never forgive myself for what I did, but I try to see if our story could have ended differently, if she had told me the truth in the beginning, if I had been a different person, able to accept her for who she is. The Bible says the truth will make us free, but sometimes the truth kills, Detective. Sometimes it's better to live in blissful ignorance. Sincerely, Lehman Price. Iris silently folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. It was raining outside the window, the drops drumming on the glass, blurring the outline of the city. Is everything all right? Nero asked, noticing the look on her face. Iris nodded, returning to her reports. Yes, just pondering the price of truth. Do you think he's right? Nero took a seat on the edge of her desk. That sometimes it's better not to know? Iris thought for a moment. I don't know, Nero. In our work, we're always looking for the truth. It's what justice is built on. She glanced at the envelope. But in one's personal life, maybe there's a truth that needs to be revealed gradually, when both parties are ready to hear it. And when trust has already been built, Nero added. Exactly, she sighed. What strikes me about this story is that all three of them acted out of strong emotions. Zari out of fear of losing love, Tucker out of jealousy, Lehman out of a sense of betrayal. And no one was able to stop and just talk. Human nature, Nero shrugged. We're rarely rational when it comes to our hearts. Iris gathered the papers into a stack. Let's go. The captain is waiting for our report on the Morrison case. They left the office, leaving the envelope with Lehman's letter on the desk. Another closed chapter in the long line of tragedies they had to deal with on a daily basis. In the maximum security prison where Lehman Price had been transferred, the days stretched slowly and monotonously. Rising at 6 in the morning, working in the laundry, an hour in the yard, leaving at 10 in the evening. The walls of his cell were bare except for one photograph, a wedding snapshot, the only personal item he was allowed to keep. Every night before he went to bed, he would look at the smiling face of the woman he had loved and killed and silently ask for forgiveness, knowing he would never get it. Sometimes the prison chaplain would come to him and try to talk to him about repentance and redemption. Lehman listened politely, but without much faith. What redemption could there be for a life taken? 25 years, 9,125 days until eventual release. A lifetime to realize that hatred and revenge bring no relief, that you can't kill the truth, even if it breaks your heart. One day, while browsing the prison library, he came across a book about transgender people. He took it, hiding it from the other inmates. Nights he read it in the dim light, trying to understand Zari's life before they met. Her fears, her struggles, her desire to simply be accepted as a woman, without reservations, without constant reminders of the past. Started writing a diary, not for publication, not for justification, for myself. I tried to honestly understand my feelings, my reactions. I tried to imagine how I might have reacted differently, what he might have said when he learned the truth not from jealous Tucker but from Zari herself, in a moment of trust, not betrayal. Thousands of miles away from the prison, in a small jazz club in New Orleans, a young pianist was ending her performance with a melancholy melody. It was Zari Price's favorite composition, a small tribute to her friend from Kemba Shaw, who was now the club's owner. In the corner of the stage was a picture of Zari at the piano, with the same smile that had once won Lehman Price's heart. Kemba often thought back to their college years, when Zahir was just beginning her journey to becoming Zari. How they had chosen her new name together, how she had cried upon receiving her first compliment as a woman, how she feared she would never be truly loved, and how her eyes shone when she talked about Lehman, about his love, about finding happiness at last. How gradually that light faded, replaced by fear of exposure. If only she had told him, Kemba often thought. If only she had trusted him. But you can't change the past. One can only learn lessons for the future. In Zari's memory, Kemba set up a fund to help transgender people facing violence. And every year on her birthday, his club hosted a benefit concert featuring the music she loved so much. Life went on, with pain, with memories, with lessons that everyone learned for themselves, and with the hope that someday the truth wouldn't cost so much.